Hey everyone, welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This podcast is all about farmers markets, how to increase your market business success, and in our current climate, maximize safety while providing people with fresh food. Farmers markets are essential. Whether you're a farmers market manager or a small farmer or food maker selling at farmers markets, you have found just the right podcast. On today's episode of Tent Talk, we're going to chat with Shawn Menard of Seacoast Eat Local in New Hampshire about the challenges of planning for indoor winter markets in 2020. I'm one of your hosts, Bridget Myers. I've spent years as an on-site farmers market manager, and I'm the education coordinator at Farmers Market Pros.
And I'm Kat Fields-White, Director of San Diego Markets, still an active Farmers Market Manager, founder of Farmers Market Pros, and host of the Farmers Market Pros community and upcoming Intense, the Farmers Market Conference.
And I'm co-host Justine Marzoni-Mead, Tent Talk producer, marketing director for Farmers Market Pros, and I have a new title this week, logistics coordinator for Intense, the Farmers Market Conference 2021, which is coming to you live online February 15th through 18th.
I think we were calling you the technical coordinator in the last couple of weeks, and then I thought, she's just doing so much more than just tech.
I like it. It's just like each week I have a
each week it just kind of expands.
Our business cards are getting very long.
That's right.
Well, welcome back to Tent Talk, everyone. Today we are so excited. We're chatting with Shawn Menard, Program Director at Seacoast Eat Local, where one of his many duties is overseeing the organization's winter farmers markets. Shawn also serves on the network leadership team for the New Hampshire Food Alliance. Welcome, Shawn.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Thanks for being here from far away. This is coast to coast.
From one coast to another.
That's right.
We
probably could not be
between us.
That's
so
right.
Many.
I mean, we're in one corner, he's in the other corner. We've gone diagonally across the whole country.
Wow.
Everyone in between.
So many
cute.
market managers have this data flying over their heads right now.
I love it. Oh, well, Shawn, we're just going to get kind of started with a little background stuff. So can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your professional background, and how you wound up working with farmers markets and food systems?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in my current role with Seacoast Eat Local for about a year and a half. Prior to this, I worked in food co-ops for about the past 8 years. So I was produce manager of a co-op in New Hampshire and general manager of a much smaller co-op up in central Maine. And from that experience, I really enjoyed working with local farmers and food producers and connecting them with their customer base within the community. That's definitely the part of the work I've enjoyed the most. And sort of a year and a half ago, took a really great opportunity to change my career a little bit. And I'm working with Seacoast Eat Local, which is a nonprofit. First time I've ever worked with a nonprofit. But the work I'm doing is still very similar to the work I was doing before, just sort of within a different context. Still working really closely with both the producers and the consumers of local food. And my current role, I pretty much wear lots of hats. As you were just talking about, Justine has one more hat on her head. I've got lots of hats on my head too. I oversee the fundraising, the finance, the program development, the staff. We're a really small organization. We only have 3 of us paid staff members at Seacoast Eat Local. But that being said, I feel like we still have a really strong impact in our community, and the work we do is really, really valuable.
Awesome.
Are you on site at farmers markets at all?
I'm on site at the winter farmers markets that we host. I personally am not staffing any of the summer markets.
So how many markets are in your area? And so, sorry, just to get a clear picture, how many markets do you guys have? And then what is the organization's role with the markets? So you're at the winter markets, but then you have other staff that does the summer?
So I can provide a little more clarity on that. I should say I'll go back to last year, because last year was a little bit more normal than this year. We had
Tell us about it.
Within
Really?
within our region, which we serve 2 coastal counties in New Hampshire and the southernmost county in Maine. So within that service region, last year there were 18 summer markets and 8 winter markets. This year we expect there to be probably about 2 or 3 fewer winter markets at least. And we experienced about that many fewer summer markets this past season. So our role, we at Seacoast Eat Local only organize winter farmers markets in the area. So we have farmers markets at 2 sites that we do. One's at a large greenhouse in New Hampshire, and the other's at a fairly large high school. And then we don't actually staff or operate any summer farmers markets. What we do is provide SNAP services for several of those summer markets. So depending on the year and the scope of what's going on, we have staffed the SNAP booth. Other years, we've just helped other, whatever farmers market that we're providing the SNAP services for, we've helped them find, a volunteer or an intern or somebody to help staff that SNAP table.
So have there been official protocols in your area for operating under COVID-19? Is there anything that Maine or New Hampshire has put out, or your local counties?
Yeah, at least the outdoor markets, it's nothing you wouldn't expect. It's just sort of more of the same. I know you guys have been talking about a lot of the markets throughout the country, the past few months. Many of the sites are trying to pay attention to occupancy, although that's not really something that's been a huge problem with outdoor markets. The big things have been social distancing, making sure there's no prepared food or sampling, and things like that. So, it's nothing really completely new as far as summer markets go.
Do y'all have a mask mandate back there?
Yep. It's changed so many times too that I think at one point.
Yeah, what time is it? Let's see. Maybe we do, maybe we don't.
We've gone through waves of there being either local or state mask mandates in certain contexts, other time periods where there weren't mask mandates, and either the host venue or the market managing organization itself put in a mask mandate. So that's been, just one of those little things that's been so hard to keep up with. It's not a stable thing. And there are lots of different town guidelines. And, given that we serve a little bit of Maine and a little bit of New Hampshire too, it's been quite different, especially heading into the indoor season for us here up in the winter. Maine is a lot more strict currently than New Hampshire as far as indoor guidelines go.
Oh, interesting. So what's the difference between the two sets of guidelines?
So, and this could very well change by the time markets even
Sure.
start, but a lot of the
or by the time this is broadcast.
Exactly. A lot changes in a weekend, right?
Right.
A lot of some of the smaller markets in Maine that we've been talking about in their preparation for the winter season, they can only have 50 people within the confines of market. So you think about how many vendors can you have, which cuts into that 50 people, and how many customers can you even have inside?
50 including vendors.
Yeah, just indoor events of this nature, 50 people. So you think about what that trickles down to, you can't really have that many customers in a market at one point in time. I think the Maine Federation of Farmers Markets is really trying to work closely with state officials and local authorities to try and provide some clarity and flexibility on that heading into the market season, but there's nothing I'm aware of yet. Versus us in New Hampshire, where we primarily operate, the occupancy limits is basically just 50% of whatever the legal occupancy is for that indoor space, which is in most cases much, much easier to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. So Maine's not making that distinction in terms of the size of the space and the number of people per square foot and all that. They're just saying 50 people. We actually went through that at the very beginning here in San Diego, way back in March. We went through a week where first they told us we could have a maximum of 250 people, including farmers and vendors, and then within 48 hours that had changed to 50. And then 24 hours after that, they said you could have 10 people, including farmers, vendors, and staff. So we're out. So, and then we had to work our way back from there. So maybe Maine will adjust their guidelines. It took a lot to get us to switch up. But I can see that indoors, it'd be a concern. But if you're talking about an indoor gym in a high school versus an indoor, somebody's basement, picking just a random number of 50 does seem like not necessarily the most scientific way to decide how many people can fit and still keep distancing.
So did your markets change, opening dates for your winter markets, or when do the winter markets typically open?
Yeah, well, I sort of back up a little bit just to provide a little bit of context. Our winter market season, this past season, we had to cancel the last 3 markets, which would have been 2 dates in March and 1 in April. And then that sort of
Oh, wow.
bled into the start of our summer market season here in New England, which typically begins for some markets in May, but most of them by sometime in June, when it's warming up and the farmers have had enough time to see some nice things coming up out of the ground. Most of our summer markets here did have to delay their opening. In some cases, it was just a couple weeks. In other cases, it was a month or longer. And in a couple of cases, markets just completely canceled the season altogether, even for the outdoor summer season here. Now, fast forward to our current point in time here, we're sort of mid-October, and our winter markets start indoors the middle of November. So we're just about a month out, and we are still planning on doing our schedule the way we normally would. So we're starting about the same time. We're planning on ending about the same time in mid-April, and in between there, we plan on having about the same amount of markets. So for us, it's kind of every other week, although it's can be a little bit more frequent during the holiday seasons when we have markets. But for the most part, it's every other week. So it turns out to be about a dozen winter markets that we have for Seacoast Eat Local.
I'm just curious because it's funny to look back on what we were all talking about and thinking back in March and April. But when you had to cancel the last few markets of last year's winter markets, did you start to kind of run through like, what if this continues? Or were those kind of like planning? Did you start planning for this year, last year, when you had to kind of trail off the end of last year's season?
Well, and when you say last year, remember that this was six or 8 months
I know,
ago.
but I'm talking about like
last
the
season.
end of last
2020.
Yeah.
Right after the conference this year. Yeah, it's all such a blur at this
Well,
point.
in the context of things, it's like 2020 feels like 3 or 4 different years all packed in one.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yes, definitely.
Even.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We definitely didn't start planning for this current season at the end of last season. The thought was we have no way of knowing what's going to happen between, at that point it was mid-March, and looking forward to mid-November seemed like a complete dream. It was like, how do we even predict what's going to happen between there? A lot of what we did right away when we canceled the end of our season in March and April was helping vendors find alternative sales outlets, because we understood that part of the responsibility for us canceling markets, which, to give you context of what our winter markets look like, it's anywhere from 45 to 60 vendors. So we understood the financial implications of canceling 3 market dates for that many vendors. We worked really, really hard and really closely with vendors to create alternative solutions, connect them with other retail outlets. In many cases, we helped, farms that had adequate outdoor space create like these small, like mini pop-up markets where maybe 3 or 4 other vendors came and tried to space out in the field and sell stuff that way. So that was a lot of what we did in March and April, and a lot of other things having to do with our other programs, our other nonprofit programs. But I remember the day that we decided to cancel the end of our last season. It was our markets are on Saturdays, and I think it was really early Thursday morning of that week that we finally made the call. And I was thinking, as of Monday of that week, that we were going to go through with market as planned. And things really, really changed quickly that week. Obviously, I think we all remember what that was like. And I remember getting some phone calls and emails from customers in particular who were not happy that we canceled market. One person in particular, really made a point to say, I think you guys are making a huge mistake by canceling markets. I would really enjoy having a conversation with that person now, just to see if they would take
You're
that
just being
back
hysterical.
or sort of like hear more of what their thought process was at that point. But I think it was just new for everybody. And getting into this year, from the customer point of view, I think a lot of people have the expectation that people are used to masks and people are used to social distancing and all of the other parts of life that just were completely new back in March.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier now to explain it to people because they're used to seeing it everywhere. Did you have any summer markets that converted to online sales or drive-throughs or some different iteration of the normal outside market?
Actually, very few, I think, had to go that route. One in particular I can think of tried sort of like a drive-through model. It didn't go very well. I think you just need to have a really robust organization and a lot of people to make that happen. And this is a market that's fairly small. It's in southern Maine. They're mostly volunteer run. And I just think they didn't have the manpower to make it happen, unfortunately. That's the way a lot of our markets are in Maine and New Hampshire and other parts of New England, is they are quite small. We obviously have a lot of big ones too, but not a whole lot of markets felt the need to utilize an online sales platform. I don't know what it's like, in you guys' neck of the woods or other parts of the country, but we have a few businesses that are sort of like aggregators that were already set up to operate in other ways. Like we have two fairly large local food aggregators that were mostly set up to do wholesale to like restaurants and institutions and stuff like that, where they have online ordering, delivery, farmers drop off at a central location, it gets distributed, sort of like a food hub, if you will. That completely converted their business model to be direct to consumer. So there are lots of other things in our area where folks have been able to order online through a business and have it delivered right to their front door that didn't have to do with a farmers market organization. So a lot of farms and businesses took a quick pivot to make sure that people can keep getting the food that they were expecting to get at farmers markets. So it was nice to see. I would say, to answer your question more directly, farmers markets themselves didn't have a huge online presence, but there were other businesses that were able to take on that effort.
Yeah, that's mostly what it was here too. I've seen some other areas where the farmers markets themselves really plunged into online and to drive-through and that kind of thing. But in our area, there was one market manager that kind of did that. There was one vendor that formed sort of a coalition of shelf-stable products in particular and did that kind of thing. And then we've got some major produce distributors that already work with our farmers a lot, and they were already distributing produce. We really didn't see the point of creating a system that was a produce distributorship and calling it a market. It was,
exactly.
That's kind of two different businesses, and they were already doing that. So it made sense to let them keep doing it. Are both of your winter markets that Seacoast Eat Local runs in New Hampshire?
Yeah, they're both in New Hampshire.
Okay, so you don't have to deal with the 50-person maximum situation because you're not in the state of Maine.
Not yet, anyway. I mean, we're hoping
Yeah.
we're hoping things at least maintain, although it's anybody's guess. With obviously what's happening out in Europe, where they're getting another major wave, and that's likely to happen here around the United States. But we're hopeful, and we're sort of entering the season understanding that there are so many things out of our control, and we're just completely willing to go with the flow and continue offering farmers markets as a service so long as it's safe to do so and people want that.
Yeah. So assuming all goes as planned and nothing changes between now and the opening of your market, how can you just tell us a little bit about how you've adapted this year? Like, is your schedule slightly different than it has been in typical years? And have you changed the fee stalls? Have you changed the number of vendors participating? How have things kind of shifted for this year?
Yeah, like what's the plan?
What's your plan?
Logistically.
What you've been doing and what you're going to
Nuts and bolts wise, since
we've been doing a lot. And to go back to previous question, I think when we really started to understand that this season was going to be challenging was probably about late May or early June, where we started having conversations about this winter market season. And we've had so many conversations and thrown around many, many ideas, some of which we didn't incorporate, others we did. A lot of the biggest changes for us are going to have to do with the customer experience, although there are some things that are going to be obviously different for vendors. We decided not to change our vendor stall fees. It was something that we didn't want to have one more thing be different for vendors. In the grand scheme of things, even if you change stall fees $10 or $15, that can be a big deal for a vendor, as you guys know. Given that we are indoors, our typical market layout has been one table right next to another. So we've had to really space out our layout, gone through several iterations of what that map looks like. Our winter market coordinator, Morgan, has been working around the clock doing many, many versions of what the map could be, sharing it with the venue, making sure it works for them, coming back, adjusting things. So that's been really challenging. I think I mentioned earlier, our indoor markets have anywhere between 45 and 60 vendors typically. We're looking at more like 30 or 35 tops this year. So there's going to be 6 feet between each vendor. The aisles are going to be much farther apart. We're going to have one-way traffic, dedicated entrance and exit, and many other little components weaved within the layout. But some of the other big changes that we're going to at least try and see what happens. And, all this is in the context of we wanted to make sure we started off doing everything we could right from day one, not let's try and have our markets be more of the same. And then as we start to fail, incorporate one piece and layer things in. We wanted to just come out with everything that we thought would work, or at least contribute to a successful market right out of the gate. So this year we're trying something totally new. We're going to have customers register for a time slot to attend markets. Because typically what happens is there's a line of about 100 people waiting outside the door, or in the case of the greenhouse, already in the building, waiting in line to get to the separate greenhouse where market is. So, 100 people waiting, easily 300 or 400 people come within the first 45 minutes or so. So that, initial bottleneck is something that we just safely can't comply with this year based on, town regulations and the requests of our venues who are gracious enough to continue hosting us. So that's going to be an interesting experiment, I guess. And our whole goal with that is to spread out the customer load evenly throughout time. So we're going to have 15 or 20-minute time slots where people can register and come, so that instead of having 90% of people come within the first hour and a half, we'll spread that out evenly. That will also ensure that based on our occupancy, we're not having so many people show up at any given point of the market too. Because of course, you guys know, managing markets, it can ebb and flow depending on the day or the weather, or different conditions.
Well, and we have a lot of people waiting in line. What's your weather like back there? Or what will it be like, do you think, in November when your market's open?
Yeah, so
Will people standing outside be standing in the snow?
Yeah, so I would say it's fairly similar in southern Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, even a good part of Massachusetts have fairly similar weather. We typically don't have accumulated snowfall really until December. And even some years it can snow and melt a few times and not have any real solid snowpack until January. But you sort of just assume that snow or freezing rain or sleet or any inclement weather could happen as early as Halloween. So that really encapsulates our entire season, given that we start markets in November. And of course, climate change, whether you believe it or not, it is causing us to have interesting weather patterns these past few years. So we typically don't have a ton of snow right off the bat, but it can be really challenging when you have 14 inches of snow 12 hours before market. You've got to make sure that cleared out. You have to make sure you don't have ice building up where customers are waiting, and many other factors.
I know that we just had a call with some folks in the Illinois Farmer Market Association group, the managers across that state. And some of them are keeping their outdoor markets going longer because they're having a challenge at finding venues for their winter markets. So they're extending their outdoor season, but they're nervous about that if they've declared that they're going to have outdoor markets like through November and then Chicago gets a dump of snow, which is entirely possible at that time of year, then what do they do? Although I have seen the Portland, Oregon market operate with a lot of snow on the ground, and some other markets in different areas. So it's obviously possible. And I guess if you come from a snowy area, you know how to deal with that.
New York do outdoor markets
New York does
year
outdoor
round,
markets all year round. So
yeah, we definitely considered that. I think for us, and actually there is one market in New Hampshire I'm already aware of that's at least planning on doing an outdoor market during November and December. But I think it's a big cultural thing, right? Like we're just not used to having year-round outdoor markets in New England. It's just not really something that people do. So, here we are trying to figure out like what's the right call. Do you do one outside and have it possibly be a challenge because of weather, or do you do it inside and risk obvious, indoor factors taking place.
But if ever there was a year to try something new,
Yeah, I mean, 2020 is
everything's
pretty
new
much
already, right?
Yeah, this whole year is pretty much, that's just not what we do. Oh, but we're doing it.
Yeah, but you never know. I mean, I wouldn't want to like have a whole plan to have an outdoor market and then people don't want to come shop outdoors and all those farmers and vendors are out there. So yeah, definitely everything's a little risky to mix it up.
Yeah, we ultimately decided to keep our markets in the same venues because we are fortunate to have quite large venues. You know, I think it would be a different story. Like there are other markets in our area that are in a town hall or a small community center, places like that, where you just can't really do a whole lot in those areas. So I could totally see that. But for us, you know, we have very large indoor venues, relatively speaking, that we're going to at least give it a try and see what happens.
And your venue owners are comfortable with that, right? Because that's the other thing that we're hearing from some people working on indoor markets or winter markets is that the venue that they've always used has said, oh no, I'm not taking the liability for having a lot of people inside. Or it's in some cases, it's a governmental venue, like you were saying, a town hall or something, and the city itself is saying, nope, not hosting an inside event. So we have been talking to a lot of market managers in the Midwest who are just really scrambling to find a venue that will approve them and that will agree to host them.
Yeah, it was something that we were concerned with right away when we started conversations with our venues, and we wanted to be really upfront with them that, you know, we were willing to work with whatever guidelines they wanted to have in place, given that they were fairly reasonable given the time. So we've had at least monthly conversations going back to May with both venues, and sometimes multiple conversations per month with the venues, going back and looking at maps, layouts, plans, you know, where do we want to have vendors line up, you know, where can we have customers wait, inside, outside, things like that. So if there's anything I would encourage any other winter indoor markets to do, it's just make sure you do have really, really close and consistent communication with your venue. It's something that we've had, you know, really good relationships with our venues for over 10 years, our existing winter markets. So they have a certain trust within us to make the right call. And we were very, very open that, you know, we didn't want to do anything that they felt would be a detriment to their business or their organization. And, you know, I can also say we would have had dates in a normal season locked in by the end of May for the upcoming season. This year, we didn't have complete confirmation from both sites until Labor Day. So we were way behind the eight ball. You know, you can't really do anything until you have confirmation with your venues as far as what your dates are going to be. You can't do the vendor applications. You can't really talk to sponsors because you don't know where the markets are going to be. But really pushed everything back in a way that has been challenging.
Yeah. So are you guys doing advertising, community outreach? Are you pushing this on social media? How are you telling the public about this event? And how has that, public communication been different than in past years?
Yeah, it's, you know, we're really only just getting started with public communication, like I said, because we are so far behind the eight ball. We would have normally done a Facebook advertising campaign. You know, other years we've done like print and radio ads. Another thing that we do every year, I shouldn't say every year, but in the past few years, we've done direct mailers to area homes with our full schedule, unlike a little postcard thing. So, you know, we would have already done all of those things by now. And what we're focusing on this year is, because we don't know what's going to happen, we're just promoting our markets on a month by month basis. So each month has two markets. You know, what we plan for November might end up being completely different than what needs to happen for December. So instead of doing those mass mailings and large campaigns with our, you know, nice design graphics that have the whole schedule and everything on it, we're just taking it month by month and trying to make sure that the key information that people are seeing isn't the dates, but it's the regulations, the guidelines, and the major changes from previous years. And, you know, I think it's something that we're going to only have to continue doing, because our previous 10 years of markets have almost been the same one year after another. Now we're going to have to spend a lot of time every single week making sure we continue to push that message out. You know, we want to make sure people know you have to wear a face covering. We want to make sure people know about making appointments, that new thing that we're trying. Another thing I didn't talk about yet is we're going to strongly suggest that people only send one person per household to market. You know, we typically see groups of easily 2 or 4 people coming to market, and we just can't handle that sort of audience. So all those little things, I think, will add up to make a big difference, but it requires full buy-in and participation from both customers and vendors. So we're trying really hard to make that communication clear.
You know, that group size is probably the most challenging thing that we deal with. We count people in and out of each block. We have a maximum number of shoppers allowed on the block at one time. And encouraging people to come in small groups is just about the toughest thing, I think, to get people to pay attention to.
Because you want to go with your buddy. You
or-
want to like meet up for coffee and take a stroll through the market.
Well, and we're in an area where we get a lot of tourist traffic, and so we've been on all these lists of the top 10 things to do in San Diego. Go visit the Little Italy Mercado. And so people show up with 8 people, and that means 8 other grocery shoppers standing in line while they go through. So it's really challenging. I would think that maybe with your reservation system, though, you could say, you only take 2 reservations from one group. One, I will tell you, is really, really hard to enforce. Are you using a particular platform to take those timed reservations?
Yeah, we've actually had an intern working with us from an area college, working with our market manager to look at several platforms. And the one we decided to at least start using is called Acuity. I think it's a Squarespace-based platform, and it is a paid service. There are different levels. But what it does enable you to do, depending on the level that you buy, would be sending both text and email reminders. It doesn't require somebody to create an account or download an app. You can just go on a website, create your scheduled time slot and get the email reminder. What we also can do as an administrator on the back end is send through as many email reminders that we would like, or announcements. And it also enables us, as someone's creating an appointment, to check off that they've read our market guidelines, that they will stay home if they're feeling sick, and that they agree to wear a mask. So that's a really nice way to make sure that our market guidelines are literally in the face of somebody as they're attending market, or at least signing up for a market date. Is anyone that enters market conceivably will have an appointment. Anyone that's made an appointment has had to check off that they've read our market guidelines. So, that's obviously not a bulletproof system, but we hope that it will at least create, a much stronger dialogue and conversation, and avoid a lot of those really confrontational situations that you can have at markets this time. And I'm sure you guys are well aware of the issues of wearing masks and having to do other things that people just are not in agreement with. It's unfortunate.
Yes. It'd be nice if people check the box, because it's like we have the rules posted, and then we'll say them verbally also, and then people will walk through and like take their mask off, and I'll stop them in the market and say, "Hey, you have to wear your mask," and they'll be like, "We didn't know that."
How could you?
Well, I told you, and you read the sign, but I guess you didn't sign anything. So that might be helpful to have people have to check those boxes, just as a little more accountability, and so people won't be trying to get away with as much stuff. So.
And I'm sure your vendor or your venue appreciates that, liability reduction if people actually have to, agree to the terms and conditions of the event.
Just agree to the rules. And then a lot of shoppers are like, all right, this is the time we're living in. I'll agree to these rules. I want to come in and shop and support. So just kind of covering your bases, and then hopefully it'll be successful for everybody.
Yeah, and honestly, that was kind of a turning point with one of the venues. The point person for one of the venues we have our winter markets at has always been really supportive, but has been hesitant because of obvious liability situations that you guys are talking about. And I think the turning point for him was when we brought up that, okay, what if we do appointment-only customer base? And by way of that, we can also make sure that people are seeing our guidelines front and center. And when we talked about that, it was a complete turning point for him. He said, okay, I get what you guys are doing. I think that is enough for me to have you guys come in now. And, it was a lot of iterations of building in one more layer of safety for him to come around, but it finally was the whole appointment thing, and the ability to have direct email communication with everybody that we knew was going to come to market that day.
Yeah, to show them that you understand that it needs to be different, and that you're taking it seriously, and you guys are going to be, the point people for making sure that things stay as safe as possible.
Yeah, and I mean, also just in terms of emergency plan.
Yeah.
Heaven forbid something did happen. If you found out one of your vendors didn't feel well after that event or something, you could actually contact everybody that attended the event.
Yeah,
exactly.
Built-in contact tracing.
Tracing,
that's
I
true.
think is really important.
Yeah, that was another thing we sort of realized after the fact, was we've never had contact information for everybody that's come through a market. I mean, I don't think any market can really.
No, that'd be great though, actually.
That'd be awesome.
Specific point in time, it's like, especially for contact tracing, we already have all the vendors' email addresses, obviously, and now this just enables us to bring in another layer of communication. We had talked about, do we leave a certain percentage of our attendance or our occupancy open, for people that don't have internet access or snap shoppers or what have you. I think we're still having that conversation. We're not quite sure yet, but for the most part, we would have an email address for everybody that came to market as far as contact tracing goes.
Like a number of walk-ins for the day or something.
Yeah.
I guess you could put somebody at an entry with maybe an iPad or something, and enter walk-ins into your reservation system.
Yeah.
I mean, they'd obviously have to wait if that time slot was already full, but at least you could have them go through, even if you had to type it in for them and
exactly.
have them press the box that they've read the rules. Yeah. At least you'd have their contact information and stuff.
Yeah, we've considered that too. And luckily we've got another month or so to decide if we do want to do that, exactly how many people we're willing to let in on walk-ins.
Yeah. And it could be something that you change after you guys get open and see how it works and see what the foot traffic is and everything. So those things can kind of get figured out as you guys open up and see everything. I know we're kind of winding down, but I did have a question because you mentioned something earlier about sponsors. So do you guys have sponsors for the market for this upcoming winter season? And if so, what has their reaction been to it's going to be reduced foot traffic and that kind of thing right now?
Yeah, we haven't had any sponsors commit to the season yet. So just out of context, last year we had, as far as our budget goes, we had about $7,500 out of sponsors contribute, which is a pretty good portion of our budget. Our revenue for our markets total is about $45,000. Or at least that's what the budget was for last season. This year we're looking at a budget of around $27,000, anticipating several losses. So we haven't had any sponsors commit. I've reached out to all of our sponsors from last year, and they're either just not sure it's something they're willing to contribute to, or just business isn't good enough to contribute, because a lot of our sponsors from last year were small community-owned businesses. One was a hospital. Obviously, hospitals are in a whole world of their own right now.
Yeah.
So that's been a really huge portion of our funding that we're going to be missing out on in all likelihood. We do expect to have maybe a sponsor or two commit in different ways than we've offered, because that's the thing. A lot of the time you have sponsors come in to represent their own business at your market. We just can't do that. We don't have any room for visiting nonprofits or sponsors or other community groups. So
yeah, we're in the same boat.
Yeah, exactly. Our entire sponsorship budget has been wiped out since March, because it's usually sold as a sponsor activation. So there's one booth at each market where there's a business that can be there, and we can't have businesses at the market right now that make people linger and listen to their information. We have to keep moving, so the line keeps moving.
We're going to try some different things for funding this year.
Yeah.
Well, Kat, you already hit up our shirt fundraiser. Thank you for that. So we're doing.
I bought a shirt.
Oh yeah, you said you got a shirt from them.
I did.
We're doing a little
shirt.
Online shirt fundraiser from a local artist that made a design. So we're just going to do small stuff like that.
It's got a chicken on it. How can I resist?
Generate income.
Resist. We should post that in our Farmers Market Pros group though, because I know a lot of our market managers are just looking for creative ways to bring in support for the market, either because vendor count is down, sponsorship is down, all those things. So we're looking for those creative avenues. So I'll share that link with our listeners. I'll share it in the group so they can all check out what you guys are doing with your shirt fundraiser, because that sounds so fun.
And there's a chicken on it.
Well, I'm going to have to get one for my husband.
So I think plenty of people will want that shirt. Let me tell you what. Variety of colors. It's actually very cool. I have kind of a related question. Not about markets, but I know that one of the things that your organization does is the Seacoast Harvest Guide. So you do a printed publication every year, right? That covers all the things. I got a chance to flip through it online, and it was amazing how many farms you have listed there and farmers markets and what have you. How has this affected that? So I'm assuming that those same people that have business downturns and can't afford to sponsor markets may also have business downturns and can't afford to buy ads in your harvest guide. So how are you seeing this whole situation affect that part of your program?
Yeah, luckily the Seacoast Harvest Guide happens in an annual cycle. So we usually start planning the guide around October or November of every year. Then it comes out around May, right before our summer market season starts. So this past year, we had pretty much already locked in sponsors and different commitment levels. We had already gathered data from farmers markets and farms. All those things were happening December, January, February. So we had pretty much already had the guide in a good place to produce. The one thing that was really challenging was we had to sort of put the brakes on a lot of the farmers market information, because right at the time we were about ready to start editing the guide with our graphic designer, we were like, well, is any of the information we collected going to be accurate by the time people
Yeah.
We had to sort of go through and get updates from farmers and vendors, but all the sponsors at that point were still willing to commit. I think it's going to be another story this year as we start planning for the 2021 Seacoast Harvest Guide. And, there might be some opportunity for us to improve the Seacoast Harvest website that we use. We also have a corresponding online resource where you can go on and search for different foods or farms in our area. That's something that we've sort of relied on a little bit more, is our online presence, because you can update your online information much, much easier than you can update an annual printed guide that you print, depending on the year, in quantities of 8 to 12,000.
Yeah, printing seems like a sketchy bet this year.
Yeah.
Any kind of printing for anything. It's like,
that was
are we
the
going
other
to print
thing.
this poster? Maybe not.
The big thing we decided to change was we really scaled back and only printed 5,000 copies this year, which was, I think, the lowest we had printed in years, because this is sort of like our flagship program. We've been printing it since 2007, so it sort of scaled back a little bit this year.
I love that you do it. I come from publishing, in addition to coming from a few other industries, but we published a serial entrepreneur, but we published a magazine for a long time for independent restaurants. So it's
awesome.
a B2B kind of magazine, and I appreciate the challenges of publishing and having to commit to a big print run when you don't know if you can verify the information that's contained in there. Yeah,
appreciate the effort. I just resubscribed to all my magazine subscriptions because print is not dead.
That's right.
That's right.
Print's not dead.
I love a printed thing. So
Well, it's coming back, right? Because people want resources at home. So
yeah,
that's right.
Exactly right.
Might as well read a few magazines at home on the couch.
Well, and it's the old high-tech versus high-touch thing. So the more we are locked into technology, and especially now with all the isolation that working at home and things creates, people are craving things you can touch, including printed material. I think hardback books, they were saying, and paperback books have just exceeded online books for the first time in many, many years, because people want to touch something right now.
And vinyl's coming back too.
That's right.
There you go.
And your eyes are tired. So
you're tired of looking at the screen. You want that paper.
yes, love it.
So anything else that you think that you should tell us from New Hampshire that the world needs to know?
Well, there
Anything
could
we
be
missed in our conversation?
There could be so
there
many.
could be so much. I mean, related to farmers markets, maybe. Sure, let's rope that in.
I mean, I would just want to reiterate to any market manager out there listening, or that's tuned into you guys' network, is to just really be in touch with your customer, because a lot of what we've tried to plan for our season is taking the customer's consideration into mind. And I talked about the scheduling and the one person per household. We know that inevitably putting all these new regulations into place, we're probably going to not capture all the people that we normally would have otherwise. But we tried to really put out surveys over the past few months, ask people what they wanted, would they even be comfortable attending an indoor market. So that was a large part of, our planning for these past few months, is just listening to customers. Of course, we've been communicating regularly with our vendors as well, but really just make sure that the service that you're offering is what customers want it to be. Maybe customers in your area don't care about a pickup or a pre-order model. That might not be something they're interested in. So before you go and put in the effort, just make sure that you're at least doing the best of your ability to pull customers, because this is new for everybody. It's not just new and challenging for us market managers or the vendors. I can also imagine it being really challenging for the average consumer that's trying to figure out how to digest all this information. Is it safe? Is it not? Where is the nearest market in my area? The one down the street closed. There are lots of questions on the consumer end. So just do the best job you can, continuing to keep really close contact with your followers.
Yeah,
Good advice.
That's a great reminder, because sometimes I think we get so with our team putting our heads in a circle to kind of plan and make make arrangements for the market and try to guess what's best, but it's good
Yeah.
to like look up and see the people that are shopping or who are saying they want to shop and ask them what works best for you right now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of market managers' tendency, and I think rightfully so, is to advocate for farmers and vendors and to look after, the business owners that they're bringing into their market. But it is also important, obviously, to think about the people that are showing up and helping you support those farmers and vendors, and it has to be that two-way street.
For sure.
Thanks, Shawn.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Jinx.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, we're glad we caught you, and we hope to talk to you soon. And thanks for listening to Tent Talk, being one of our listeners. And yeah, just a reminder, we'll post information about that fundraiser so our other market managers can take a look at that in our Farmers Market Pros community. And we hope we talk to you soon, Shawn. And good luck with your winter markets. We'll kind of keep an eye on you guys and what you're up to and what that looks like when you guys get open. And we're excited for it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate the support.
All
Great.
right. All
Thank
right. We'll
you.
talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Farmers markets are all about community, not just for the shoppers, but for the operators, farmers, and vendors. To hear what's happening from people just like you in the farmers market industry in various parts of the country, or share what's happening in your area, we have terrific conversations and people sharing resources over in our private Facebook group, the Farmers Market Pros Community. Please find us there, answer the 3 qualifying questions, and join the group. You can also message us on Instagram at Farmers Market Pros, or send us an email at connect@farmersmarketpros.com. Thank you so much for listening to Tent Talk. Please leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you access your podcasts, and tell us and others how you're enjoying Tent Talk. If you are listening on YouTube, give us that thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss our next episode. Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is proudly produced by Farmers Market Pros, where passion meets profit. Today's episode was recorded and edited by Justine Marzoni Mead. Original music by David Mead.